She looked at me once, and I knew I was in trouble. The trading post on Kepler Station orbited a dying red star, and nobody came here unless they were running from something or looking for something they should not have, and Lieutenant Jake Morrison was both, and he stood at the far end of the cantina, nursing a drink that tasted like burnt copper while trying to blend in with the crowd of smugglers and outlaws who made this place their temporary home. The air smelled of ozone and recycled atmosphere, and something else he could not quite identify, and the dim lighting cast strange shadows across the faces of a dozen different alien species who barely glanced at the lone human in their midst, and Jake liked it that way, because the less attention he drew, the better his chances of getting off this station alive. He had been running for 3 weeks now, ever since the incident on Colony 7, where everything went wrong and the mission fell apart, and half his squad ended up dead, and he still did not know who to trust or who had sold them out. But he knew one thing for certain, and that was that someone wanted him dead, and they would not stop until they finished the job. That was when she walked in. The entire cantina seemed to shift when she entered, and conversations dropped to whispers, and even the bartender, who had seen everything in his 40 years working the station, looked up with something like respect or maybe fear in his 4 eyes, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat because he had never seen anything like Hirsch. She was tall and impossibly tall, and her skin had this iridescent quality that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue,
depending on how the light hit her.
And her eyes were large and luminous, and they glowed with an inner light that reminded him of distant nebulas, and she moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone her size, and every step she took was deliberate and confident. Her hair, if you could call it that, fell in long tendrils down her back, and they seemed to move on their own and shimmer with colors that should not exist in nature. And she wore a suit of armor that looked organic, and it hugged her form in ways that made Jake forget to breathe, and across her back was strapped a weapon he did not recognize, but it looked deadly enough to level a small building sheet. Scanned the room with those glowing eyes, and Jake tried to look away, but he could not, and then her gaze found him and locked onto him, and for a moment the entire universe seemed to shrink down to just the two of them, and he knew in that instant that his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. She walked toward him, and the crowd parted without being asked, and Jake gripped his glass tighter and tried to remember his training, and tried to remember all the protocols about first contact with unknown species. But his mind went blank because she was standing right in front of him now, and up close, she was even more breathtaking and terrifying human, she said, and her voice was like music and thunder combined, and it resonated in his chest and made his bones vibrate. And you are far from home. Jake swallowed hard and tried to find his voice, and yeah, he managed to say, and you could say that. She tilted her head and studied him with those incredible eyes. And I am Commander Kira of the 7th Fleet, and you are the one they call Morrisonette. It was not a question, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine, because how did she know his name, and how did she find him here in this forgotten corner of space? And he set down his glass and met her gaze, and depends on who is asking, he said. She smiled, and it was like watching a supernova form, and I am asking because you have something that belongs to my people, and I have been sent to retrieve it. Jake's hand moved instinctively toward the small data chip hidden in his jacket, and the chip that had gotten got his squad killed, and the chip that apparently contained information valuable enough that this alien warrior had tracked him across 3 star systems to find ITI. Don't know what you are talking about, he lied. Karis' smile widened, and her teeth were sharp and white and human. You are a poor liar, and that data chip contains classified information about an ancient weapon system that predates your species by 10,000 years, and my government wants it back, and you will give it to me, or I will take it from youth. Cantina had gone completely silent now, and everyone was watching and waiting to see what would happen, and Jake knew he had 2 choices, and he could hand over the chip and hope she let him live, or he could try to fight his way out and probably die in the process. He chose option 3. He grabbed the edge of the table and flipped it toward her, and in the same motion he drew his sidearm and fired 3 shots at the ceiling. And the lights exploded and plunged the cantina into darkness, and he ran behind him. He heard Kira laugh, and it was not the reaction he expected. And then he heard the sound of her weapon charging up, and the wall beside him exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal, and he dove through a doorway and into the narrow corridors of the station. He ran harder than he had ever run in his life, and his boots pounded against the metal grating, and his lungs burned in behind him. He could hear her following, and she was not even trying to be quiet, and her footsteps echoed like thunder, and he knew. She was playing with him and letting him run because she could have caught him already if she wanted to. He turned a corner and nearly collided with a group of Tarkelian traders, and he pushed past them and kept running and found a service shaft and climbed down 3 levels, and his hands were sweating and his heart was hammering in his chest, and he could still hear her somewhere above him and getting closer. Jake emerged into the lower docks where the smaller ships were berthed, and he had a transport waiting and just a little shuttle he had purchased with the last of his credits, and if he could just reach it, he might have a chance. He sprinted across the docking bay, and his ship was right there and just 50 meters away, and he could see the cargo ramp was already down, and he put on a final burst of speed, and then something wrapped around his ankle and yanked him off his feet, and he hit the deck hard, and the air rushed out of his lungs. He looked down and saw that one of Kira's tendrils had extended from somewhere behind him and wrapped around his leg, and she reeled him in like a fish, and he clawed at the smooth metal floor but could not find purchase, and then she was standing over him and looking down. With those luminous eyes, you run well for a human, she said, and but the chase is over. Jake glared up at her, and go to hell. She knelt down beside him, and her face was inches from his, and you do not understand the importance of what you carry, and that weapon system could destroy entire worlds, and my people built it long ago, when we were young and foolish, and we have spent centuries trying to keep it hidden, and then your military found the coordinates and sent a team to investigate, and now here we are. I was following orders. Jake said orders, she repeated, and look where that got you, and half your team dead, and you on the run, and being hunted by people on both sides. So want you dead. She had a point, and Jake's jaw tightened. And what do you want from me? Give me the chip and I will let you live, and more than that, and I will help you disappear and give you a new identity and a new life somewhere far from here where your enemies cannot find you. It sounded too good to be true. And why would you do that? Jake asked. Because Kira said, and you are not like the others, and I watched you on Colony 7, and I saw the security footage, and you tried to save your team, and you tried to stop the massacre, and you are one of the few humans I have met who seems to have a conscience, and that is rare in your species. Jake studied her face and looking for any sign of deception, but all he saw was honesty and maybe something else, and something that looked almost like respect. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the data chip and held it up. And if I give you this, and what guarantee do I have that you will not kill me anyway? None, Kira said, and you will have to trust me. Jake laughed, and it was a bitter sound in trust, and that is not something I have much of these days, I know, she said. And but what choice do you have? She was right, and he had no choice, and he was trapped and outmatched, and she could have killed him 12 times already, but she had not. And maybe that meant something. He handed her the chip. Kira took it and examined it for a moment, and then she tucked it away in her armor. And thank you, she said. And I know that was not easy now. What? Jake asked. Now, Kira said, and I keep my promise. And she extended a hand to help him up, and he hesitated and then took it, and her skin was warm and smooth, and her grip was strong, and she pulled him to his feet with ease. Come with me, she said. We're somewhere safe and somewhere you can start over. Jake followed her across the docking bay and toward a ship he had not noticed before, and it was sleek and beautiful, and it seemed to shimmer in the dim light like it was not quite solid, and the design was unlike anything human engineers had ever created, and it was clearly Kira's vessel. Inside the ship was even more impressive, and the walls seemed alive somehow, and they pulsed with soft light, and the controls were incomprehensible, and Kira moved through the space like she was part of the ship itself. Sit, she commanded, and gestured to a seat that formed out of the wall. Jake sat, and the seat molded itself to his body, and it was the most comfortable thing he had ever experienced. And Kira moved to the pilot station, and the ship hummed to life around them. Where are we going, Jake? asked Kira. Looked back at him and smiled that devastating smile and away from here, and that is all you need to know for now.